Iris RAINER Dart. I'm the author of Beaches, talking today about my musical, The People in the Picture, that's opening in San Jose, California. I'll be talking with Rabbi Sol Solomon on Dave's Gone By on UNC Radio.
Oh, shalom, my friends. This is your old pal, Rabbi Sol Solomon, founder and spiritual leader of Temple Sons of Bitches in Great Neck, New York. And I am so excited to be talking to an author today. Now, if you missed on Broadway back in 2011 a musical called The People in the Picture about Jewish artists in Warsaw, if you're on the West Coast, you can come see it April and May. They're reviving it. And as a matter of fact, Theater Mania called the original deeply moving. And speaking of tears, who didn't tear up when Barbara Hershey bit the big one in Beaches? Well, guess who wrote the book for The People in the Picture? Guess who wrote Beaches? It's a woman named Iris RAINER Dart. She also wrote for the original Sonny and Cher show. She's got a bunch of best-selling novels, and she's even a member of Pittsburgh's Allardyce High School Hall of Fame. Or I think I pronounced that wrong. It's Allardyce High School Hall of... Well, we should tell about it anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a hearty shalom to Iris RAINER Dart. Shalom, Iris!
Shalom back at you, Rabbi.
So is it Allardyce? What is it? How do you...
Allardyce. It was named after a man named Taylor Allardyce.
Doesn't sound very Jewish, but you're very Jewish.
I am very Jewish. That's true. In fact, my grandchildren. I'm in New York right now, so I'm calling my grandchildren, who call me Bubby, and they are coming from Israel, where they live. My
yes!
married an Israeli.
Oh, yay! So, but where in Israel? Where are they?
They're in Ra'anana.
Ra'anana? I can't say I've
ever... it's a bedroom community for Tel Aviv. It's a beautiful, wonderful neighborhood that they live in. So, and great schools, and they're very happy there.
Oh, Mazel McGlicken, tell us, since The People in the Picture is a rather Jewish musical, tell us how Jewish you were in your upbringing and how Jewish you are currently in your life.
Well, I grew up in a family with immigrant parents. My mother was from Russia, my father was from Lithuania, and my mother was one of 9 children. My grandmother had 11 births and 9 surviving children.
Involved.
And my Bubby never spoke English ever. And my parents spoke Yiddish most of the time, to the point where I didn't know growing up which words were English and which words were Yiddish.
Wow.
I once went to a friend's, the neighbors next door who were not Jewish, invited me for dinner, and Helen Ackland said, which part of the chicken would you like? And I said, the fliegel.
Did they at least know to do a kosher chicken, or did they not even...
No.
Wow.
But then she said she didn't know what I was talking about, so I thought, I was 6 years old, I thought, maybe everybody else wants the fliegel, and I shouldn't ask for that. So I said, okay, I'll have the pulki. And she finally just said, well, point to it, dear. Because...
At least you didn't ask for the Pope's nose. That would have been a problem.
No, that would have been a problem. But, so I grew up in that household. My mother, it was 2 sets of dishes, completely kosher household. I went to Sunday school. I went to Hebrew school for 5 years. I did not have a bat mitzvah in those days. We couldn't afford anything like that, but I did have a confirmation. I directed the Purim spiel, and so that was my upbringing. Yiddish was a big part of my life because my father was a social worker in a settlement house at the Irene Kaufman Settlement for 40 years. So we had very little money, and I wore hand-me-downs. My cousin's father was a bookie, and they were rich, and we were poor. So, as I always say, I learned very early that life wasn't fair. But I had beautiful hand-me-downs from her, and I never looked back on my childhood as having been deprived, because we had a very happy family. My older brother was extremely funny, and we used to make up musicals all the time. In his hardware store, he was 16 years older, and he had a hardware store, and we would make up musicals about all the customers that came in and make up songs. We always laughed. We had Mickey Cat singing David Crockett on
record. Wait. You on record, or you actually had him?
Oh, on record. So everything was, there wasn't anything that we couldn't laugh about. My father used to call me down years ago when Selma Diamond was on the Jack Parr show. Do you remember Selma Diamond? She had this kind of catchy voice, and she was a TV comedy writer, and she was the only woman writer on several TV show staffs, and I would look at that and think, why does he want me to be that catchy old woman, which in fact I have become. I said I wanted to be Sandra Dee, not Selma Diamond. But somewhere along the line, I became Selma. I graduated from Carnegie. I had Carnegie Tech, it was called in those days. And I lived at home the entire time I was in college because I couldn't afford the dorms, and I was on a scholarship the entire time.
Ooh.
Moved out to L.A., thinking I was going to be an actress. I was such a terrible actress. Thank heaven I had an acting teacher who said to me, "You should be a writer."
Okay.
As an actress, you're a very good writer, right? So I started writing, and I ended up being in those rooms as the only woman writer.
Now, we're almost rushing through your autobiography here, but I want to stop in certain places and dwell a little bit. For example, do you have any memories of being a child actress? Were you on live Playhouse 90s sort of television or things like that?
No. I was a child actress in Pittsburgh because...
Oh, Pittsburgh, yeah.
So I acted at the Pittsburgh Playhouse, yes. I played Blinkers the Owl when I was 5 on the stage for the Pittsburgh Playhouse. I have an older...
Blinker, who? Yeah, that's an owl joke right there. I'm sorry.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have an older sister, and she was kind of the Mama Rose of my life, and she would take me to auditions, and I would get the job. So I worked in a lot of theater in Pittsburgh, and then I auditioned for the drama department, which is brilliant. It still is, at what was then called Carnegie Tech. And, I mean, some of the alums now have been in Hamilton, and Christian Borle, who was a graduate, has been in a million different shows.
He was in Something Rotten and shows like that, I think.
Exactly, yes.
Falsettos, I think, also, yeah.
And,
but by the way, you mentioned Mama Rose, and I think that show, Gypsy and West Side Story, were watersheds for you in terms of loving the theater as well. Is that true?
Yes. How my father ever did this, I do not know, but when I was 14 years old, we got into his old Plymouth station wagon that was so beat up, it had holes in the floor, you could see the highway going by, and we drove to New York, and we all stayed in one hotel room together, and he somehow managed to get us tickets for Ethel Merman and Gypsy. Was my first Broadway show that I ever saw, and when the overture started playing, and somehow we were in the third row, I guess those last-minute producers' house seats, and I heard the overture play, and I wept, and I just said to myself, this has got to be a part of my life, and I've always been so in love with musical theater. And then the next night, we went to see West Side Story. Can you imagine those being your first 2 Broadway shows? And I was just completely hooked, and that was why I wanted to go into the theater. And while I was at Carnegie, my sophomore year, I went into the varsity show committee, and I pitched an idea for a musical. They were looking for musicals, and I didn't realize people were submitting scripts and tapes, and I just said, hi, this is my idea. It was my first meeting, and they said, we want that. So I went away. I was in summer stock, and I had very small parts, so I had a lot of time. And I wrote my first musical on a steno pad.
Wow!
And when I got back to Carnegie, now I was a big junior, and an incoming freshman boy called me and said, "Hi, I hear you're writing the show. I really would like to write the music." And I thought, oh God, a freshman. You know how you are at that age. A freshman wants to write my music. Who could this be? And I said, fine. I will meet you and audition your music. And he said, great, let's meet at the call board. And I said, how will I know you? And he said, I look like a cross between Ringo Starr and Barbra Streisand. And that boy was Stephen Schwartz.
Now, whatever happened to him? Just kidding.
Yes, I know. Poor kid. He never made it. So...
Well, for those who don't know, he went on to write Wicked.
My Mother's Kitchen Table.
Wow. I'm just letting people know he wrote Wicked and The Magic Show and Pippin. Pippin.
Godspell.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but anyway, and now though you still you didn't want to be an actress anymore. You wanted to write for the musical theater, but then how did you get waylaid into books and movies?
Well, the first thing that happened was I met my first husband about 6 months after I went to L.A. to live with an old friend, a roommate, a young friend of mine from Pittsburgh. She said, "Oh, come out and stay with me, and it's so nice here. It never rains." I thought, "Oh, that's good. It never snows." I didn't know the word drought at the time. I said, "Oh, that's wonderful. It never rains and never snows. That's for me." So I went there, and about 6 months into my trip there, I met Steve Wolf, who was my first husband, and fell in love and just said, he was a rock concert promoter, a young rock concert promoter, and I thought, oh, well, I'm going to stay here. And again, every time I tried to get an acting part, the gods were speaking to me saying, honey, this isn't going to work. My first character that I played was on an episode of The Fugitive, and the name of my character was Another Co-ed. That tells you the size of the part, not to be confused with a co-ed who had a line. Another co-ed just stood there.
Actually, I once played the other co-ed. It was cut from the final draft. But anyway, yes, continue.
So I started, I was in a comedy troupe, and I would write the show, and every time I wrote, something good would happen. And so Steve Wolf introduced me to a woman he knew who wanted to be a writer. Susan Silver was her name. She has a novel out, by the way, called The Writer Wore Hot Pants. And you should look for that. It talks about what it was like to be a woman in those days, trying to break into the business. At any rate, we wrote episodes together, and our manager was Gary Marshall, and Gary Marshall was a mentor of mine for many years, and he kind of taught me how to write a joke and how to write comedy, and then coincidentally or not, he always said that I got him the job, which was certainly not true, but he was the director of Beaches, the movie. So,
well, let's again, we're going so quickly with this, but
I know.
When you wrote Beaches, did you, in the middle of writing it, or when you finally put the end on it, did you realize that would kind of be your calling card for the next couple of decades? Like for all the stuff that you've done and written, everybody will be like, oh, she wrote Beaches, and oh, we love Beaches.
On my tombstone.
Yeah.
She wrote Beaches, remember her? I loved Beaches, and I wrote it because maybe other people do, but I sure didn't think of it as anything, but I tried to sell it, and I couldn't. Everyone said, all the various publishers said, it's not commercial. We don't care about two little girls who meet on a beach in Atlantic City, no matter what happens to them. So the lovely agent, Elaine Markson, said to me, they like your writing, but they just don't think the story's commercial. Do you have any ideas that are commercial? Well, Steve Wolf had been in the mailroom at MCA Universal, and all of the guys in his mailroom had become very successful. Mike Medavoy was a studio boss, and John Badham was a famous director, and Mark Norman was a super successful writer, and Steve Wolf was this amazing concert promoter, and I said, well, that's a really commercial story, because I would start by telling how they got to the mailroom and then what happened and follow their careers. And she said, go for it. Just do an outline, and I'll send that out. And as soon as she sent that out, there were offers. And so I wrote that one first, and it was very successful. It was a New York Times bestseller in paperback. It was bought by Aaron Spelling as a mini-series.
Right.
All of a sudden, all the same people who didn't think those two little girls on the beach were commercial loved them. Oh, Love those little girls on the beach. So then I was able to sell that book and write that book. And I wrote it because my cousin Sandy, our mothers were sisters, said to me one day, we were so close, and she lived in Florida, I lived in Pittsburgh, and we would meet in various locations and walk on the beach and tell each other everything about ourselves. And she one day said to me, as young adults, when one of us dies, I hope it's me first, because I couldn't live on a planet that didn't have you on it. And I said, ooh, that's a story I want to tell. Thankfully, she is still alive and well.
Oh, wow.
But it's a very powerful emotion. She said to me one day, if you came to my door and said I just killed 20 people, I'd say they probably provoked you. Come on in.
This is what I tell people all the time. But let me ask you, Iris Rainer Dart. So you had the successful book that, of course, turned into a big, successful movie. But in the book, I'm not giving anything away to people who know beaches, that one of the main characters dies at the end. And yet, years later, you wrote a sequel. Did you feel pressure to do that? Did you have an internal thing that you didn't want to let the characters go?
No, first of all, the character who dies is not in the sequel.
I would hope not. It would be really sick. But...
Well, some TV shows say, come up with those strange ways for people to come back to life. But actually, the real thing that happened was that Disney was going to make, Touchstone was a part of Disney at the time, was going to make the sequel film at some point. And so they asked me to write the novel, and I thought, well, it's an interesting premise, this crazy wacko Cece, the Bette Midler character raising a kid, does have a lot of promise. So, yes, that was what happened, and then they ended up not doing it, which is fine.
And let me ask you, just to stay on beaches a little bit before we get back to the people in the picture, but
okay.
When the movie of Beaches was written by a screenwriter, Mary Agnes Donahue, and you didn't write the script for the film. Did you have arguments with her? Were there things that she really wanted to change that you had a problem with, or were there things that put your foot down, or was it really smooth sailing all the way?
My husband, I'm married to Steve Dart, my second husband for 37 years. He's extremely wise, and he knows me very well. And when I went into the first meeting with an executive at Disney who said, so you'd like to take a shot at this, meaning the screenplay. And I thought, really? I'm going to take a shot at my own material? This doesn't augur well. And I came home, and my husband said, you know what? I had adapted something of Sidney Sheldon's years ago for TV, and Sidney had said to me, my version of the story is on the shelf in the library. Write your version. And I thought that was so generous, and my husband said, remember what Sidney said to you? It's time to say that. He said, you'll go to opening, the premiere of the film, and you may cry for all the wrong reasons. He said, but go on and write another novel because you're really loving that. And don't have them tell you arbitrary changes that you have to make and feel lousy about it. Just keep moving. And it was the best advice, because ultimately what happened was they hired Gary. He was my mentor. We were very close. He called me one day and said, so I'm back in your life again. Anybody who knows Gary knows that's my classic imitation of him. And we went to lunch, and he said, this is my favorite thing about him, he said, when you got a writer, a director, a producer, a studio, and a star, none of you are making the same picture.
Ooh.
That everybody brings their thing to it, and the writer has very little power, in the movie business.
Right.
And so we talked about, it was during the writer's strike, so Mary Agnes could not do a rewrite. So Gary, who was the director, did the rewrite and put back in a lot of the things that he and I talked about that day at lunch.
Oh, that's not... Because I'm somewhere in an interview you mentioned that there was a cat fight in the film, and had you been writing it, you'd be like, well, there's no cat fight between these people. That's just
right.
Hollywood
And I'm
silliness.
an ardent feminist, and I wouldn't write a cat fight. And I was on the set that day, and Beth said to me, "How'd you like it?" And I sort of cringed a little, and she said, "Oh, Iris, do you get upset every time we shoot a scene that isn't in your book?" And I said, "Honey, you're starring in the movie of my book. How bad could it be?" No, I mean, she's still one of my absolute favorites, so how could I not be happy about that?
Now, there's something that did strike me, because you mentioned your second husband, Mr. Dot, there. Is it true you met him at a party at Jerry Lewis's house? And what the hell were you doing at Jerry Lewis's house?
You've been doing your homework.
A little bit, yes.
Yes, it is. It was Oscar night, 1981, and you may remember that President Reagan had just been shot, and they canceled the Oscars, and I had just been in a breakup of a relationship, and I was very sad, and my darling was throwing the party. He was friends with Jerry Lewis's son, Chris, and I didn't want to go to the party, and of course the Oscars were canceled, and then the president was fine, thank heaven. The next day there was the Oscars were reinstated. So I had a friend who was trying to cheer me up, and he said, "You're going to this party. If I have to come over and drag you out of the house," I said, "I'll go if I can take my own car so I can leave shortly." So I went, and there was Steve Dart, and that was 38 years ago, or I guess 37 years ago, yeah. So, yes, it was at Jerry Lewis's house. But Jerry Lewis and Patty at the time were already separated, maybe divorced even, so Patty was living in the house, not...
Okay. Now, and speaking of a long time, is it true that your last novel was back in 2003, and you've just been doing theater since then?
Yes, I did write a children's book that I think came out in 2007 with a friend called Larry the King of Rock and Roll, and about a Maltese dog who becomes a rock star. But yes, because I felt as though since I took a wrong turn at Hollywood in the in the 60s, theater has always been my first love, and my daughter is now a director in theater. I used to bring her here every spring break and take her to see a different Broadway show every night, and she got hooked too. So she now lives in New York, which makes it even more fun to come here. And I just, I think of myself as a theater geek, that I'm just completely in love with it. All my years in summer stock when I was in Beach Haven, New Jersey, and we did 12 musicals in 12 weeks, sort of made me an expert on obscure musicals of the world. And
all right, wait, I'm going to call you on that. What is your favorite musical that most people don't know?
Take Me Along.
Oh, wow. Was that Jackie Gleason?
Wow,
Jackie Gleason
you are old.
Wow. Yeah, I never saw it, but yeah.
Implied. At any rate,
well, speaking of musicals, let's remind people that they can see the people in the picture, which, by the way, we haven't even mentioned, it has music by Artie Butler and Mike Stoller of Lieber and Stoller, the rock and roll guy, and that is going to be at the 3 Below Theater in San Jose, running from the middle of April to the middle of May. For more information, you can go to 3belowtheater.com, and that's 3 the numeral, 3belowtheater.com. And if I can just have another couple of minutes with you, I know we're kind of pressed for time here, but I want to know, people in the picture played on Broadway in 2011. Now you're doing it elsewhere. Are there any changes? Have you worked the book over any, or is it the same thing, same script, same songs? What?
Donna Murphy was nominated for a Tony for the part. She played a Bubby, and the show was very big. It was at Studio 54. Andy Blankenbuehler, the choreographer of Hamilton was the choreographer, and he did a gorgeous job. But the second act opened with a ballet, and there was a big, splashy Hollywood number, and I took all of that out, and I reduced it down to 10 people, and the three most important characters, the grandmother, the daughter, and the granddaughter. And it still tells the same story of the Yiddish films that were made in Poland between the wars, and this acting troupe, the Warsaw Gang, and their struggles during the war. And it goes back and forth in time between 70s New York, where Donna plays the character of Bubby, who wants to pass the Yiddish culture onto her granddaughter, and tells her the story of when she was a young woman. And brilliantly, Donna goes back and forth as 35-year-old Raisel and 80-year-old Bubby, and was.
Well, but you shouldn't be talking about Donna Murphy anymore, because people are going to see it in San Jose now. Who's the actress playing that role?
Oh, you will see such wonderful actors. Before I came to New York, I went to a rehearsal, and their company is amazing. I just saw their production of Sondheim on Sondheim in January, and I was so blown away by the quality of this family, the Guggenheim family. Scott is the director, and Shannon is the choreographer, and the brother Stephen is the music director. They're so talented. I was an arts commissioner for the state of California for 8 years, and I know about small, struggling theaters and the passion it takes to be able to put these shows up. And this family, it has got it in spades. I mean, they just have so much passion and so much talent for this show. It's going to be amazing.
Oh, yay. Oh, yay. Now, I'm sorry, but speaking of music, because I want to get all my questions before we have to let you go, but a couple of quick ones more. And not to get back to Beaches, but for a while you were working on a musical version of Beaches.
That's what I'm doing in New York. I'm working on a musical version of Beaches with a wonderful new director, and we're having a great time, and that's what I've been doing here. In fact, he's on his way over here right now to sit with me over some rewrites.
Oh, mazel. So, who's the, can we ask who the co-writer, the musical person is on the musical Beaches?
He's a young writer named David Austin. You've never heard of him, but boy, is he talented.
Oh, well, mazel. I hope that's going really, really well for you. Two more quick questions for Iris Rainer Dart, the author. One of them I just have to ask, as an Odd Couple fan from years ago. Did you write an Odd Couple episode?
I did.
Which one?
And I don't know that it ever got on. I wrote it with Susan Silver, and I can't even remember what the story was. It's been that long. But I did because Gary was so involved in that, and so he managed to get us an episode of that.
Okay, so we've been talking with the delightful Iris Rainer Dart. Everybody go see The People in the Picture at 3 Below Theater in San Jose, California. For more information, go to 3belowtheater.com. And remember, that's the number 3, belowtheater.com. Last question, because you never got to answer it from our very first question, because you were talking about how Jewish you were as a kid. But now, I mean, it's Passover time. Are you sedering? How Jewish are you now?
Well, I'm married to a goy.
Oh.
But my children live in Israel. My daughter had a bat mitzvah. My daughter is also married to, it's interesting because she came from me, a Jewish mother, and non-Jewish father, and she married 3 years ago to a young man whose mother is Catholic and whose father is Jewish. So, like us, they celebrate every holiday, her in-laws. So, I'm having Pesach. I have every holiday. I don't light candles every Shabbos, but many. And, because I'm raising grandchildren who are very Jewish, that helps me be more Jewish.
Do you teach them Yiddish? Do you remember Yiddish from when you were a kid, or just phrases like most of us do, like English?
I can, when I first started, part of the People in the Picture is that she makes these Yiddish films, and so I sent away for all of these Yiddish films when I first started writing it, and I was listening, and I was crying because I understood everything. I can listen to a Yiddish conversation and make out most of it. Could I carry on a conversation? No.
Well, I'll tell you what. How about leaving us with, if you remember, your favorite Yiddish aphorism or insult? Either one.
Let's see. I don't know. For me, it's the various words that I love so much, like ungepatchket.
Oh, I love that. Tell everybody.
Ungepatchket means overdone, too much. And it's very funny because, the theater is a very Jewish community, and I've heard, and my director uses the same word. I mean, we're just brand new to each other, but he loves that word, too. We'll listen to a song. If there's too much accompaniment, we both say it's ungepatchket, so that's one of my faves.
That is a wonderful word, and it has not been ungepatchket at all. It's just been absolutely streamlined and right. Talking to Iris Rainer Dart, I want to wish you much success with the people in the picture in San Jose, as well as, of course, your musical project Beaches, which, who knows, we may be seeing in New York and San Jose in the years to come.
I hope so.
Health, success, happiness. Last question. What is your Hebrew name?
Well, that's a good question. Yurit, I think.
Yurit.
Yeah, because my Zaidi that I was named after was Israel, and Srulik was his nickname. So my cousin Sandy is named after him, and I'm named after him.
Well, Yurit Dart. Actually, what was your maiden?
Ratner.
Oh, that's a Jewish. That's a good Jewish name. Yurit Ratner Dart. Thank you so much for being in the neighborhood with us, and shalom to you.
Shalom to you. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.